Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our discussion forum today, which is on health and safety in the natural science collections. So we're very pleased that you could join us. And we're also very pleased that we've got various panelists who are going to be presenting. So let me just introduce them all. So first of all, we've got our usual team from the NSCF Hub. We've got Chanel Ribeiro, who's the project manager for the NSCF. We've got Audrey Ndaba, who's the coordinator for curation and collection management. And I don't know if Fulu's joined us today. Fulu, are you here? Yeah, Fulu Kambani, our communication person. Hi, Fulu. And then our guest panelists today, we've got Nelisiwe Manukuza from KZN Museum. We've got Jermaine Maguire from the National Museum in Bloemfontein. We've got Sadilasiwe Mia from the KZN Herbarium in Durban. We've got Sean Peterson from Compton Herbarium. Nkosanathi Mazangula from SIAB in Makanda, Amanda Gura, Mzwai Dwani, and Zinzi Somana, also all from SIAB. So let's see their faces there. We will be hearing from them. There they are. So thank you very much to our guest panelists for agreeing to speak today and put presentations together for this discussion forum session. So we're very grateful to them. So this is just the discussion forum guidelines for engagement. So it's a discussion forum. You are welcome to ask questions in the chat box. You make comments, raise points, but keep the contributions helpful and considerate of the host and the other panelists. So you're welcome to ask questions, but do keep them considerate. Say hello, so let us know which institution you're from. Use the chat box for that. And then through all the presentations, you're welcome to be posting questions, comments. We won't have an hour for discussion today. I think the presentations are going to take up most of the day. We will have a bit of time at the end for questions. So if we don't answer them as we're going, then we will have a chance at the end. All right, so let's get started then. So the purpose of the session today is to highlight the importance of looking at health and safety issues relevant to the collection. So this is really one of the most critical chapters in the whole manual, the NSCF manual. We're going to look at why it's so important, and then summarize the critical documents and steps that are required for health and safety in the collection. So we're not going to go back through everything, all the detail, but we're going to just summarize. And then we're going to get input from various staff at institutions. So these are the people working on the ground who have had real experiences and had to deal with health and safety issues. So we're going to get input from them, and it's a great opportunity for everybody to learn from each other. And then also through asking questions, you also learn just from thinking of in different ways from everybody. So we will open the floor for questions right at the end. So it's really today is about learning more about health and safety in the collections. Okay, so last week at the webinar on health and safety, we did talk a bit about the Health and Safety Act. It's the Occupational Health and Safety Act. And it's law, it's legislation, and there's also various regulations that are also law. And they specify what must be done in all the institutions to protect staff from hazards related to the work environment. So it's law, you have to do it. It's not optional. You can't pick and choose which ones you want to do and which ones you won't do. It's the law. We have to all do everything that it says. The Act falls under the Department of Labour, so they can inspect, they can ask for documents, they can close an institution if it's not compliant. Health and safety in institutions usually falls under corporate services. So it really depends on how big and how complex your institution is. But I know, for example, in Sandby, where I'm based, health and safety used to fall under human resources. Now there's a sort of separate unit for health and safety. They fall under corporate services, and so it's sort of managed outside of the collections. But in some of the smaller institutions, you might all be completely responsible for health and safety. So how it's dealt with in institutions will really vary across all of us. But even if it's the responsibility of corporate services, there are collection-specific health and safety issues that must be addressed in the policy, in planning, assessments, monitoring, and training. So you can't just go, oh, it's corporate services responsibility and they deal with everything to do with health and safety. It doesn't involve us. It can't be like that. All staff have responsibilities related to health and safety. So every single one of us. And we can't just ignore some of the unique risks or hazards associated with collections and the work that we do in them. So we talked about what the Act says we need to have last week in the webinar, and it seems like a very daunting thing. It seems quite overwhelming, and there is quite a lot, but it's quite doable. And it needn't cost an absolute fortune. So the Act says that you have to have a health and safety policy that's displayed in the workplace, so where everyone can see it, and it must be regularly updated, and it must be signed by the CEO. There must be a health and safety risk assessment, so you have to go and do an inspection and identify all potential hazards, what they are, where they are, and which staff are exposed to them. So it's not good enough to just have a list of hazards. You've got to have details about them. And that must also be up to date. So it must be done regularly. You can't be working from 1996. It won't be valid. Then you have to have steps that are required to minimize or remove the risks. So for each of your hazards that you've identified, you need a mitigation plan of what needs to be done to reduce that hazard or remove it. Who's responsible for it, how often it must be done, and how it must be documented. For some of the hazards, there has to be monitoring, so regular monitoring to see how severe the hazard is. For example, for air quality, so if you've got chemicals and there may be chemicals in the air, it needs to be monitored. You need to monitor the health of staff exposed to dangerous chemicals. And there's other monitoring, so you need to have checks to ensure that the mitigation plan is being implemented. All of this there must be records kept, and those records, most of these records need to be kept safely for 30 years. There needs to be an emergency response plan. So what should happen in an emergency and for different kinds of emergencies. So you can have fire, you could have a chemical spill, you could have a medical emergency where someone has a heart attack. For all of those kinds of things, what will you do? What's everybody's role? Who phones the emergency services, who reports to who, and who takes responsibility for different things. It's very difficult to be deciding all of this in the middle of an emergency. You can't do it. So that emergency response plan should also include the evacuation plan. How do you get all of your staff out of a building where there's a hazard and make sure that everybody is safe? And then the Act also says you have to document and report all incidents. So all health and safety incidents need to be properly documented. And you need to know what process to follow for recording and reporting on incidents. And we'll hear more about that today. All right, next slide. The Health and Safety Act also says that training is critical. So you need to have emergency response training, and you need to have these firefighting drills or fire evacuation or other evacuation drills so that everybody's very familiar with what they have to do in different kinds of emergencies. There must be first aid training, so formal, official first aid training, firefighting training, also official. Handling chemicals, the people who work with the chemicals, have they been taught what to do, what not to do? Also with other hazards, and all this training must be documented, even if it's informal. You can always just draw up a sheet to say this person was taught how to do it. I showed them in my capacity as whatever your responsibility is, and you both sign a thing to say that there was training. All of that must be filed. Health and safety officers, there's one for every 20 staff, and they are formally appointed with a specific time period. There's also a health and safety committee that isn't listed here, but there has to be a health and safety committee that meets quarterly, and all their meetings are minuted, and those minutes are kept. And the health and safety officers and the health and safety committee are responsible for checking that things are okay. And when they're not, they have to report them. First aiders, you have to have one for every 50 staff, and that's on duty. So if the one first aider is on leave, there must be somebody else that replaces them. And they must be properly trained and have a current valid certificate. There must be a firefighting team, officially appointed and properly trained. And then there must be first aid kits. They must be clearly labeled. They must be accessible. You must know who to contact, who's responsible for that first aid kit, and who can help if you need first aid. And then the contents must be correct, and they must be checked regularly to make sure that you're not out of stock of something or things haven't expired. And then you also have to have emergency stations that are appropriate to the hazard. So an eye wash station, a shower for chemicals splashing in the eyes or getting onto the skin. So all of this is by law required in our institutions. So what we talked about last week in the webinar, what are the main health and safety hazards associated with the collections? We said fire, hazardous chemical material. So this can be the chemicals for preserving, for analyzing, for collecting, for fumigating. So there's lots of chemicals in our environment. Hazardous biological materials. So if you're working, especially with vertebrates, so working with blood and other tissues, you can become infected with bacteria, viruses, parasites from them. Broken glass, so a lot of the collection stored in glassware. If it drops and breaks, and you've got to try and work with that, it's a hazard. Physical injuries, slipping, falling, objects falling on staff. A lot of our specimens or trays of specimens can be very heavy, so lifting them can cause injury to backs, hernias. Crime is a hazard. A lot of our institutions are in the city centre where there is a risk of crime, and even outside outside of the urban centres there is crime. Field trips, we talked about all the different hazards associated with field trips, and we'll hear a bit more today. But vehicle hazards, water hazards, crime, getting bitten or stung by something, getting lost, falling, health hazards, so dehydration, heat exposure, food poisoning, and then also weather hazards, so flooding, lightning, mist. So lots of hazards that need to be considered. But what's really important is to understand the risks, so identify them, understand them, and then plan mitigation steps and implement those steps. It's really important to communicate, so make sure that there's labels on everything that's dangerous. So all your chemicals need to be properly, clearly labeled. There should be signage showing which are hazardous areas and what the hazard is. There should be awareness, so all the staff in the institution should know what the hazards are and how to minimize or reduce them, and what actions are being put in place by the institution and what's expected of them as individual staff. There should be regular updates to the staff when there's been an incident. It must be communicated. When there's been an assessment of hazards, it should be communicated. All the mitigation steps should be communicated, so staff should know everything that's going on related to health and safety. The other thing is training that we've talked about. You can mitigate a lot of the hazards by proper training of people, and then also by wearing protective clothing, protected PPEs, so gloves, masks, overalls to protect staff. So if you just put those things in place, you will already reduce a lot of the hazard. Then there's some just general things, again, very easy. All your exit routes neat, free of clutter, don't have this waste, the broken old boxes or broken specimens or other waste just accumulated on stairwells and basements, in corridors. That is just a disaster waiting to happen. And then also make sure that equipment and infrastructure like your shelving is in sound and good working order. So everything, so do regular checks just to make sure everything's all right. And so just doing those things is not terribly expensive and doesn't take that much time, considering that it can save people's lives and prevent them from being ill or from being injured. Okay, so that's where I'm going to stop. Now we're going to hear a lot more specific examples of what people do related to health and safety and some of the things that they've experienced. Our first panelist or presenter this morning is Nelisiwe Manukuza from KZN Museum. So I'll hand over to you, Nelisiwe.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nelisiwe Manukuza from the KwaZulu-Natal Museum based in Pietermaritzburg. Today I will be presenting to you about fieldwork in water, health and safety. So as I work under the malacology section, at times we go and sample. We do sample on land and also in water. So today I'll be presenting on the sampling in water. Before we go to the trip, there is an indemnity form that we sign. That means whatever that happens in the field, the institution is not liable. So that's the sad part of it. But then, because we love our work, we continue and do the field trip. And also the other thing that we do, we check the weather beforehand. Warm, sunny days are ideal for our field work. So we try and make sure that we check for the weather beforehand so that when we go there, the weather is warm and sunny. But then we all know that we cannot always predict when a storm will happen. So we try and make sure that we are always prepared. And before we go to our field work, we need to make sure that we disclose our medical condition. For example, if you get seasick when you get to sea, you need to tell other team members or other staff members that, okay, I do get seasick, so that you can take seasick medication. Or if you have any other sickness which may be triggered by motion, you need to tell the other team members or the other staff members so that they can be able to help you should need be. The most important thing that we make sure when going to the field work, we make sure that we have all the protective gear. And amongst the most important protective gear that we have, it's the helmet. You can see on the picture there, that's myself having a helmet there so that I can protect my head. And also I have my hand gloves on, as you can see there, because we get to touch hard substances that may have bad effect on our hands. So we make sure that we have our gloves on. We also have the life jackets. As we sample on water, we need to make sure that we have life jackets. Even if you can swim or not, you must have your life jacket. And also we have closed shoes, because on the boat there it gets slippery in a way that you may fall. So at least if you have your closed shoes, you can be able to have balance. Now that there is COVID-19, we also have our face masks. There are safety rules for sampling on water. The first one of them is the one that I've already spoken about, which is the protective gear. And also the second one is that you are not allowed to run on board. This is because, as I've mentioned earlier, that the floor gets slippery because we work on water spills everywhere. Then if you're running, then chances are you're gonna fall, and maybe, who knows, you're gonna fall overboard. So no running on board. And also the other thing is, one hand is for yourself and the other is for the boat all the time. Even if you are eating, you must know that, okay, one hand for yourself and one for the boat, so that you can hold balance. And the other most important thing, even though it is not a rule, but it is something that you must make sure that you do at all times, is to eat, because we don't want people collapsing on the boat because they are hungry. Because some of the equipment that we use there, they are very heavy, so you need energy for you to be able to work the whole day. So it is recommended that you eat salty stuff, sweets, and food containing ginger, because also they help keep balance on your stomach. Because if you may eat, for example, eat a lot of milk, a lot of meat, then your stomach will be full, and with the motion of the boat, then you may feel like throwing off. For us to keep safe, we always make sure that we have safety kit on board all the time. And the safety kit includes the flashlights, first aid kits, seasick medication, and the extra life jacket. Sampling on water doesn't mean that fire cannot happen. So there must be fire extinguishers at all times. And the other most important thing is that we need not to overload the boat. So as a result, we only take the equipment that we're going to use for that specific sampling. And lastly, the life jackets, I'll emphasize this even more, because life jackets are your life. So they must be there at all times, and they must be worn at all times. So when we get to the sampling sites, we assign ourselves buddies. So you have your buddy, and at all times you must see where your buddy is. Even if your buddy is going to the bathroom, or going to a shack, maybe to have lunch, your body must tell you that, okay, I'm going somewhere, so that you don't worry about him or her, because your body should be always on site. And if your body happens to fall off, you do not move, you do not run to ask for help, but you scream for help, or you blow your whistle, so that the other team members or the other staff members can come and lay a helping hand. So automatically, obviously, the boat should be stopped, and then the other people who will be coming to help you will throw the flotation devices, so that they can help you come out of water, or they will throw the rope so that you can hold on them and they can pull you back to the boat. Should the available equipment falls off, because we know that we work with very expensive equipment, so we can't afford to lose them either, as much as we can't afford losing our lives. So we immediately stop the boat, and someone who can swim can go overboard. But before that person can go overboard to try and recover that lost item, they need to wear their life jackets so that they can float, or they can use other floating devices so that they can go overboard and then try and recover that item. I thank you.
Thanks very much, Nelisiwe. So not all of us get the opportunity to go out to sea on a boat, but I think that there's lessons to learn from that. It's just about thinking through everything and making sure everybody knows when they're in the field what precautions to take. And of course, water is especially risky and hazardous, as Nelisiwe showed us. So thank you for that. Okay, next we're going to have a presentation by Jermaine Maguire from the National Museum. Over to you, Jermaine.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, everyone. I am Jermaine Maguire from the National Museum in the Terrestrial Invertebrate Department. And today I will be sharing with you some events that happened or that occurred in the past few months. So with this week's topic, I'm happy to announce that the National Museum has a disaster plan in place. It is currently being updated. The previous date is 2016, and we have detailed standard operating procedures for emergencies and disasters. To start off, so in August, we had an intruder entering our offices and collections, and this person jumped over our fence. And he looked like a stray person. He was not armed. He did not wear a mask. Imagine with the virus going on. When some of the colleagues that were with him confronted him, he managed to run away and jumped over the fence again. And all this was reported to the facility manager, and we now have additional fence. Another event that occurred, so it was on the 11th of October this year, early in the morning. So this occurred in the basement that has the entomology, ornithology, and arachnology collections. In the morning, there was water all over in the basement, and this was due to incorrect testing of water pumps. And the water just came through the building and it went into the storage rooms and some of the collection rooms. And, the safety risks were slippery floor, electrocution, and dirty water, since this was coming from the pumps that had dirty water. This is the close-up of the pictures. On the top left, this is the door going outside, and outside this door we're having our storm water drains there. And when the pumps were tested, the water came through this door and it went through other areas in the building, in the basement. We're having the storage room there, and we're also having the entomology collection side. As you can see, the freezer there. We're also having a dehumidifier there. Are all standing in water. The entire Terrestrial Invertebrate Department took upon themselves to clean up, as well as the HOD of ornithology and one caretaker. So we had mops and also a vacuum cleaner just to dry up here. The supervisor of the cleaners could not be found, and as this was an emergency, the mentioned staff jumped in to clean up. Most of the water was dried up, and we had 3 dehumidifiers running to dry up the space. So you see we have in the passage here to other rooms as well. We're having collections, entomology collection room, straight to the person standing by the door there, my colleague standing by the door. Fortunate enough for us, our collections were safe, no damage to the collections. The biggest risk was the freezer and the dehumidifier standing in the water. A subsequent electrical short could have led to fire, which could have been disastrous. And the health risk in this situation, we could not find gumboots, and we at risk for the electrocution side since the plugs were still on, so they had to be switched on. Before switched off, everyone who was there in the water stood the chance of being electrocuted. And we generally had our normal clothes. We did not wear anything. We had nothing on us that could protect us from the dirty water, and the floor was slippery, and the incident was reported to the facility manager and the CEO. So during these events, I've learned that track of time is very important. Should you be in a situation or in a position where you are busy with something, more especially if one is testing the pumps, make sure that you go through the entire process and make sure that everything goes well and you do not encounter a situation where water is just flowing all over. And always check up your buildings early in the morning when you get there and later on before you leave, because anything can happen within seconds. Early that morning in the basement, my colleague went there and checked for the dehumidifiers, and later on when I went downstairs, there was water all over. So it's a matter of seconds or minutes. So we are to check our buildings before we leave. And not everyone will respond immediately or understand the risks to the collections and the risks that we are exposed to as staff members. And the other thing to consider is that one disaster can lead to another. As I've mentioned, the whole situation could have led to fire. And always remember to remain calm, observe the situation. If you can't do anything, report to relevant people as soon as possible and ensure that everyone is safe during the process, and your collection is safe as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jermaine. So I think the important thing there is to learn from things that have happened and take that forward, and for all of us now to also learn from that experience. So thank you for that presentation. Okay, our next presenter is Petra Marais from the ARC. Over to you, Petra.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Petra Marais. I'm the collection manager for the National Collection of Arachnida, which is under the governance of the Agricultural Research Council. My talk today would be about OHSC. Just to clarify, OHSC stands for Occupational Health, Safety and Environment. Incident that happened at our building site quite recently. I'm going to highlight implications that our campus's location in a rural area has or had on responding and reporting the incident. Just a quick background on the Agricultural Research Council. It has 11 institutes countrywide. One of these is the Plant Health and Protection Institute, under which Biosystematics 4. Biosystematics is the custodians of 4 national reference collections, as well as a biobank. These collections is the arachnology collection, which is divided into an acari or mite collection and a non-acari collection. We also have the entomology collection, a mycology or fungi collection, which also has a biobank, and then we also have the nematology collection. As I discuss the incident, I just need you to keep the following in mind about the location of biosystematics. Although we are roughly 23.5 kilometers from the nearest suburb in the Greater Tshwane area, this is Eastland, we actually fall under the Cullinan district, with the town of Cullinan 42 kilometers away. The implications of this is that we have to contact the Cullinan Emergency Medical Services as per protocol as our first contact for a medical emergency. Our nearest state hospital is 33 kilometers away. The nearest private hospital is about 25 kilometers away. The nearest fire station is about 28 kilometers away. And like I said, the nearest provincial ambulance services is in Cullinan, 42 kilometers, and our nearest police station is about 7 kilometers away. Also, just to keep in mind that the Plant Health and Protection Institute is divided into two campuses that is on either side of the R573 KwaMashlanga Mulatto Road. So the incident that happened at Biosystematics about 2 weeks ago, a facility worker fell off a ladder while doing routine maintenance. The accident was reported to the relevant people and immediate steps were taken to provide medical assistance. The provincial ambulance services in Cullinan was contacted, but as I said, we are in a rural area and only marked as ARC close to the Roodeplaat Dam, so they struggled to locate the campus. Also, during the time we waited for the paramedics to arrive, the patient, all we could do was keep the patient comfortable, as there was no qualified first aiders available on campus, and he showed signs of a severe injury. A private ambulance services was contacted after about 20 minutes when the provincial ambulance had not arrived yet. And this service arrived in about 15 to 20 minutes. The patient received the medical service. So all in all, the patient received medical assistance within an hour of the incident being first reported. The paramedics assessed the patient and then they deemed it necessary to airlift the patient to a hospital in Johannesburg because of the probable severity of his injuries. And also because the condition of the road for transport by ambulance is not very good. Thankfully, we have a soccer pitch just quite close to the building and where the accident happened, so the helicopter could land there. Thankfully, there was a good outcome as the patient was diagnosed with spinal shock only, and that led to the symptoms that he presented with. Just for information, when you report or when you want a person to be admitted for injury on duty, there are certain forms that have to accompany this patient before he can be admitted. There has to be a completed COID form WCI2. This is from the Department of Labour, and it must be signed by your OHS or OHSE officer or any other duly delegated responsible person. A letter of good standing for the institution must also, that is issued by the Department of Labour, must also accompany this form. There must be proof of employment from the institution for the patient, and 2 copies of the patient's identification document must accompany this form. Lessons learned from this is that accidents can happen and they happen very quickly. Having no physical street address can cause problems. As I said, we are 2 campuses that are on either side of the main R57 road. And for you to use a satellite tracking system, you have to punch in the correct search word, otherwise you won't be able to find the correct location. I'm also not sure if provincial emergency services are always equipped with this technology. Also, the distance from emergency services, as you could see, influence reaction time. So if you report an emergency, like we did, very quickly, and if all goes well, like the emergency services are dispatched immediately, they don't struggle to find your location. For us, I roughly estimated that the minimum response time would be somewhere between 20 to 30 minutes for emergency services to reach us. Something else is the availability of a duly authorized person to sign the required forms. Our OHSC officer was not on campus the day because of personal reasons. He, however, could be contacted quite quickly, and he set the whole process in motion and contacted the relevant emergency services and provided the signed requested forms. Also, the availability of these required documentation. All these forms are available on the Institute's intranet, but as you know, during emergencies, things can be a bit hectic or get a bit hectic, and then to start looking for forms to download can sort of slow down the process. A possible mitigation factor in this instance could be to have some of these forms that are already partially completed with the required information for the institute, as well as signed by the duly authorized person, to have them available in a central area on both campuses for access by any personnel. OHSE training to personnel is very essential. It is all people in the campus or on the campus should know what the chain of command is to report and respond to emergency when there is an emergency. They should know which emergency contact services to contact, and have the numbers for these emergency services quite freely available. They also must be trained into which steps to follow, how the forms must be filled in, and where to find these forms. Also essential is that the institute should keep up to date with all their OHSE training, such as first aid training, firefighter training, and all the other training needed for OHS. And then it's very important that you should have a safety conscious workforce. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Petrus. So there are lots of lessons that come from that one incident for the ARC, but for all of us, I think. So it just shows how easy it is to not have all your chain of command and know exactly what to do, and how important it is. So thank you for that, Petru. All right, our next presenter is Sanele Siwe from KZN Herbarium. Over to you.
So today I will be speaking about DDT. This is known as dichlorodyphenyl trichloroethane, and it was an insecticide that was quite famous and very widely used in the 40s and 50s, globally. I had put this picture up there to show basically how the global consensus at the time was how good of a product DDT actually was, which we have come to know that it actually was not. Over there on the top, you can see it being used for crop dusting as well. And if you look at the bottom, that's a child over there whose home was being sprayed, because one of the other uses, or one of the more famous uses for DDT was that it was used for malaria suppression, as it killed, as it was the cheapest form of killing mosquitoes and amongst other pests. But another of the reasons that I have chosen to speak about DDT is that not only was it doesn't seem like it was ever banned in South Africa, but just last year, HIL, which is the biggest supplier of DDT in the world and is based in India, managed to supply 20.6 metric tons of DDT to South Africa for the malaria control program. The Silent Spring book that you see there by Rachel Carson was basically a book that managed to bring about policy change in America in terms of conservation, because they started to notice that it was killing out the birds, and that it was causing bird eggs to be so thin that the chicks wouldn't survive. And so we all know that the first thing we notice about spring is that you hear all these birds chirping, and that particular spring was quite silent, as there were no new chicks chirping. In order to understand the effect that DDT has not only on wildlife but on humans as well, you need to understand the concept of bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Bioaccumulation is the increase of contaminant levels over time in an organism, whereas biomagnification is the increase of the contaminant as you go up the food pyramid. This is what I was referring to earlier on. Most of these, well, all of these birds were particularly affected by DDT, given that they are at the top of their particular food pyramids. And as you can see there, I have the bald eagle, the osprey, the peregrine falcon, and the brown pelican. And the pictures that I put up there just to show you what a normal egg would look like versus what an egg that's been affected by DDT looks like, because the high levels of DDT interfere with calcium metabolism, and that makes the egg lining very weak, the eggshell very weak. And I included this slide because museums actually managed to contribute towards the conservation of the peregrine falcon. They managed to compare what a DDT thinned out egg looks like versus a normal egg. And this was basically because of an idea that actually came to someone and used museum saved specimens in order to have a look at that. So what are the health risks in humans? As discussed last week, occupational health risks will affect a person's health, but they will take time to result in illness. Nothing could be more truer, as in the case of DDT. Known side effects are developmental abnormalities, reproductive diseases, neurological diseases such as autism, and cancer. And exposure to the DDT metabolite, which is called DDE, also promotes abnormal human health effects such as childhood diabetes and obesity. And for those who are keen to learn more, they can have a look at a YouTube video that is called DDT So Safe You Can Eat It, featuring an entomologist who's actually eating porridge sprayed with DDT, because that's how much they thought it was safe. At the top there, you see a woman being sprayed for typhus. Like I said, it wasn't just malaria. That lady was being sprayed under a typhus control program, and that was in Italy. So I had explained the wildlife impact of DDT, and what you see at the top is a bird of prey who is at the top of their food chain. But what is another organism that is at the top of their food chain? It's us humans. You know, we eat fish as well. And in the last slide on the bottom right, you can see the fish Hydrocinus vittatus, which is actually the South African tiger fish, which is found here in KZN. And it just so happens that the highest OCP concentrations ever measured in South Africa were found in the tigerfish. And the tigerfish happens to occur naturally in the northern parts of KZN, which is where a lot of the malaria control programs were. And who eats tigerfish? The locals. Another thing, another reason that made me want to speak about DDT is because in as much as it is still found, I don't know about other herbaria, but it's definitely still in our herbarium, we don't realize how dangerous this thing is, especially given that because it is not only it's not only bioaccumulant, it's also biopersistent. And so not only could you still be exposed to it, even though you were not physically exposed to the DDT, you can get it from the food that you're eating, you know, through fatty animal products. But also, I just want to explain this part. If when your mother was pregnant, she was exposed to DDT, and you were already a fetus in her tummy, all the eggs as a female that you will ever have will have already formed while you are a fetus in her tummy. So if there was any DDT in her system that she passed on to you, that would be in your eggs as well. And so what happens is that DDT, in as much as it doesn't change a person's DNA, it doesn't change a genetic code, it does change genetic activity. And so how that DNA is expressed, all the alleles and stuff, that's however that information is meant to be expressed, they can be your germline epimutations. And so further down the line, like third generation down, you can have effects that are as a result of your mother having been, actually your children's grandmother having been exposed to DDT 2 generations up. And so at the KZN Herbarium, for all health and safety issues, we have monthly KZN Herbarium health and safety awareness meetings, and where we have topics that we discuss, things like ladder safety, snake safety, safety on trips. We have OHS committee meetings where all the relevant health and safety staff from the other divisions meet and discuss whatever issues that may have come up in our meetings. We have monthly health and safety inspections that are done by our H&S rep, which is Ketiwe Kumalo. We have an annual internal health and safety audit, which is done by the Deputy Director of Occupational Health and Safety, which is Edward Mlaudzi. And then we have an annual external audit, which is done by the company called NOSA. In terms of DDT, we do not handle food inside of the herbarium. We wash our hands upon entering and leaving the herbarium. Gloves and masks are provided. And just as an addition, I wanted to say that the KZN Herbarium does provide health and safety training, does provide, does have like a complete reporting line of health and safety. There are first aiders that are trained. I'm one of 2. There are first aid kits positioned all across the building. There is a firefighting team, and yeah, that's it from me. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. Michelle had asked me to find out when was the last time that DDT was used on our specimens. Mr. Ngwenya didn't know the exact year, but in 1983, when he began, it had already been stopped being used. Yeah, they already ceased usage of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Saneli Siwet. So I think that there are some lessons there about, we sometimes assume that if a product is around, it must be safe. And, so even some of the currently used chemicals may have long-lasting effects. So it might not make you sick immediately, but you don't know what it could be doing in the long term. And so it's better to always be cautious, even if you think something may not be toxic. If it's meant to kill insects, it might have some effect. So yeah, it's just about being careful and understanding the complexity of the impacts of some of these chemicals on health, potentially. So thank you for that. There's lots of important lessons to learn from the DDT story. Thank you. All right, let's move on then. So our next presenter is Sean Peterson. He's from the Compton Herbarium at Kirstenbosch in Cape Town. So over to you, Sean.
Morning, everyone. I'm Sean Peterson. I'm based at Compton Herbarium in Cape Town. This morning, I chose to focus on fire, not just from a collections perspective, but also in general. I mean, at Kirstenbosch, we have a mixed building in which we house the Compton Herbarium itself, but also housing other units doing their respective work. And fire around here plays a very big role because we are so close to the mountain. The image in the background on the first slide is actually a picture post-fire at the UCT library, and the devastation there was quite bad. So I thought I'd just pay homage to that. So in Cape Town, we have a saying, the safest way to deal with fire is to prevent it, and that mainly comes from a Sand Parks campaign that they ran a few years back with all the veld fires, which were kind of caused by arson. And it's quite remarkable to see that a lot of people are so fascinated by fire. I mean, why wouldn't you be? In some cases, it's quite spectacular, but it is dangerous. And I think that we should always be mindful of ourselves and others and the environment we find ourselves in when we are dealing with fire. So there are quite a number of sources that can lead to an outbreak of fire, such as lightning, wildfires, gas leaks, and the like, as I've listed there. But a few of the more important ones and more pertaining to what we work with would be faulty electrical installations and equipment, smoking around buildings, arson, which is a big one in Cape Town and around the country as well. And ironically, renovation works. Despite many renovation companies taking very good care and lots of precaution to prevent fires, you know, accidents happen, and all it takes is a single spark to get things going. And the associated risk and consequences of fire is either the total or partial burning of wooden structures such as furniture, soot deposition on collection objects or in collection objects in the case of wet collections if they were to be left open, and then the reduction of building structural integrity. And obviously the big one would be injury and loss of life, which is actually worst case scenario, and we always try to avoid that. So at Compton and at the KRC in general, the KRC being the Kirsten Marsh Research Center, which is where we are based, we have quite a number of fire controls and response actions in place, such as having clearly identifiable emergency signage. On the right, there are a few pictures. The first picture being our evacuation plan, which is a little out of date, and it needs to be updated for certain sections of the building itself. We also have a fire suppression system in place. The second image is a picture of the unit that we have in the building itself. We also have a fire detection system. I didn't get any pictures of those because the detectors are quite small, but they are placed in each office and all around, well, not all around, but rather in every passage of the building. You should also be conducting regular fire prevention training and evacuation drills. And for me, it's always a case of observing people who feel affronted by the fact that we are conducting drills because it imposes on their work time. But, you know, if a few minutes a day or a few minutes every other week to set aside for getting people into the mind frame of evacuating in time and what the procedures are for evacuation, if that enough such a time, like a few minutes a day, or like I said, a few minutes within a week or so, it's worth it when it comes to saving someone's life or even saving your own life. We do also have regular inspections of our fire prevention equipment like the extinguishers, and they get serviced annually. And then we also provide, or training has been provided to our first aiders, and the first aid boxes, they are not housed or kept with the first aiders themselves, and they are placed in areas that are easily accessible. Earlier this year, we had a fire at the KRC, and this is my example that pertains to this discussion. It was an electrical fire that occurred above one of the laboratories we have here. It actually started in the roof, and luckily for us, all the staff did evacuate, and we got the fire department in as well. The fire protocols were mostly adhered to, although we still had people who were reluctant to believe that it was a fire because, I mean, we thought it was a troll. And you know, it's really alarming that if people hear a bell ringing, that they don't just get up and leave. They want to be called or fetched. So the human life aspect of that was kind of questioned. There was mostly just structural damage above the lab itself. And post-fire event protocol was adhered to. We did submit reports, and the fire department submitted their own report as well. At present, however, the building is of limits to anyone and everyone. And SCM is currently handling the ordering and collection of services for the renovation of the building. And the staff members in the interim have been relocated to other parts within the KRC. So just to conclude, we should always adhere to the rules and regulations. They're there for a reason, and mostly to save people's lives. We should also be mindful of fire risks in our facilities, because a lot of us do deal with high fire risk material. And our lives are precious. Why would you risk it? And again, the safest way to deal with fire is just to prevent it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sean. So, yeah, I think, again, learning from an experience, once there's been a fire, I think it makes everybody much more aware of just how quickly it can happen. So thank you for that. All right, let's move on to the next one. So we've got 4 presenters from SIAB, and we know that SIAB have been very much on top of things when it comes to health and safety. And so there is a lot we can learn from the staff who are involved in this. So over to you. I think, of course, Sonati is going to be kicking off for the SIAB people. Over to you, of course.
All right, good afternoon. So the name is Nkosinathi Mazungula. So I manage the collections division platform of SIAB, leading a team of high performance leaders. I think it was Dells and Ills in Cape St. Francis. They said we come to the process as leaders. So my colleagues and I will talk to you about our concerted effort to address issues or aspects of occupational health and safety in our collections. So I will kickstart the process by talking to you by tackling fire safety in our collection. All right, so SIAB is the national facility of the National Research Foundation, that is the NRF. We are situated in Makanda, a small rural town of the Eastern Cape. There, so the picture on the top right, that one there is showing Grahamstown and SIAB as it relates to, at the back of SIAB there is Rhodes University 1820 Settlers Monument. And then the picture down there is the SIAB main building where our offices are. So the JLB Collection Management Center, where our offices are and where we have students and researchers who work in the collection, have offices. And then we have here that is now the collection. The collection, and next to the collection is the fish farm, which belongs to the Department of Ecology and Fisheries Science next to us, but we have taken over those dams. All right. So this year is the one thing I neglected to mention here. So we are about less than 2 kilometers to the fire department and about 2.4 kilometers to the Netcare Settlers Hospital. All right, so this is our collection here. So this is our collections, which houses more than 1 million specimens that are preserved, that are stored in ethanol, propanol. Some our tadpoles are in formalin. And just in our chemical store, we have about 5,500 liters of concentrated of concentrated ethanol, 1,000 liters of propanol, which are coming out from our recyclers. Any of the business units that want propanol can contact us. We've got 1,000 liters that we can give away. Still in our chemical store, we have about 750 liters of concentrated formalin, 1,000 liters of waste formalin, which we're still going to recycle. We recycle them and then we get about 10%. We don't get a concentrated formalin, we get 10%. All right, so this is obviously a fire risk. So to help us in case of fire, we have this system. It's called a fire sprinkler system. So water is held under pressure in the pipes that run through the collections. If you see this picture here, so there are these throughout the collection. So how it works is it discharges water when fire is detected. So it's not a fire, it is not triggered by smoke. So there needs to be fire for it to be triggered. So it controls and extinguishes fire when it works. And so it's both a fire detection system and a fire suppression system in one. So this is linked to the building management system, which we call BMS. So we get, this is our pressure. If you see in the picture here, we got about over 500 kilo. The pressure is that we're getting from the municipality is about 500. And then, but for the BMS to work, the pressure needs to be about 1,000. So what we have done is here we've added a water pump just to boost If you see here is about 1,000, and then the pressure from the municipality is about 500. So to boost it up. So the building management system, how it works is it monitors the pressure inside the fire sprinkler system. So when a fire is detected, so what the building management system, it triggers the fire alarm system, which is this here. What it does is we have a phone behind it which calls the traffic department. It calls the MD collections manager and let them know that there is fire in the collection. As you know, they are less than 2 kilometers to SIAP. So when they get to SIAP, we have a fire sprinkler booster here. So they can, without even them coming inside the collection, they can connect their pipes here and then we can hopefully extinguish the fire. All right, so it's well and good if we have fire, but I'm sure many of you have heard in the news, Grahamstown is, we have waterless days. As you can see, this is the picture of the BMS, so the water pressure in the collection for the last 7 days. So you see, this is the pressure in here. This one is the pressure in the fire sprinkler system, is about maybe average 950, but this is the pressure we are getting from the municipality. So on waterless days, it's maybe about 60, and then when we have water, it's about 550 something. So we use this to monitor the pressure. So this helps us do that. All right. So to help to aid the fire suppression system, we've got fire extinguishers all around the building. So we have 11 DCP fire extinguishers. The one that's is carrying this one is a DCP fire extinguisher. We've got 11 of them throughout the collection, and this big one here, we have 2 in each floor, and 2 CO2 fire extinguishers where we have our X-ray system, the biobank, and our backup system. Okay, so we have a service contract with G1 Fire. So they take care of all the servicing of our fire system. So like this is the sprinkler system. So the last time it was serviced, it was 2020. So next time it's serviced is due for service in 2023. But because of the problems we are having with the water in Grahamstown, Angus has taken a decision as to service all these annually and not to wait for 3 years. So you can see here all our fire extinguishers starting from 2017, they've been serviced. They're due for service in 2022 now. All right, so this is the fish farm which I've said to you that we have taken over from DIVS, which we are going to refurbish and repurpose it so that it can be our backup system. So we will refurbish this and put more water and put water here. Then the water will be pumped to the collection when we are in trouble needing water. So what are we doing in the meantime? So all the guys we just finished doing, because the projectors they have, I think they're going to complete it in 2023. So in the meantime, we need to make sure that everything is in order. So when we don't have water in the collections, so we limit activity in the collections, no collection tours, no visitors. We make sure that there's less activity in the collection, and we have fire drills I think 2 times a year, in April and before, and the next one before year end. So yeah, that is about it that we do here. So let my colleagues continue.
Thank you very much, Nkusanati. So yeah, you can see the benefits of being in a small town because you're close to the emergency services, but then also the challenges when you have water problems. So yeah, it is a big challenge that's facing SIRE. But I think that there is also an important lesson with SIAB having their collection, their entire collection housed in a separate building to where all their people sit. And the motivation for building that collections space was that it was a massive risk to the staff to sit in a building where all of that ethanol and all of that propanol was. If there was a fire, it would be devastating to the people. It was such a high risk that they were able to get the money to build that separate collection storeroom. I think that there's also a lesson in that. So thank you for that. All right, we move on to the next SIAB speaker.
My name is Zwai. I'm a collections and the safety officer at SIAB. I'm going to be presenting about working with hazardous chemicals. In the collection, we work mainly with 3 chemicals. We fix our specimens in 10% formalin, and from there we transfer them in series of alcohol changes from 10%, 50%, until we preserve them in 70. In the previous days, we used to take them, we used to preserve them in the 60% concentration of propanol. But we are slowly changing that, but I'm going to talk about that later. There are various ways in which the chemicals enter our body, such as eye contact, skin contact, injection, and inhalation. On this slide, I'm going to talk about the hierarchy of control of the control measures. But on this one, this is what is expected from us in a perfect world. But as you know that we cannot eliminate the fumes completely. So we cannot remove the chemicals that we are working with. We need to work with them. The most effective one is to eliminate them, and then the least effective one is to use the PPE. These are control measures that we are using for our environment at SIAB. We are trying by all means to eliminate the formalin in the CMC, because CMC is where we are working, and then we expect to only have propanol and ethanol. Hence, we are having, if you can look on the left, this is the formalin sensor. So if the readings of the formalin are above 0.75 ppm, so this will trigger the alarm and immediately will evacuate the building for 1 to 2 hours. As I've mentioned, that we cannot eliminate. We are trying to replace the propanol with ethanol. So what we are doing, as you are working on Albany Museum collection, we don't put back the propanol that was already there. So we try to replace it with ethanol. With our collection as well, when we come across the specimen, maybe we are working with it, maybe it's out on loan, but when it returns, we put ethanol on that specimen. So we are gradually replacing propanol. Hence, Kosnati said we are giving away lots of propanol because we are no longer using the propanol, the recycled propanol. We also have engineering controls. If you look on these are the fans. So, okay, these are our fans. So what's happening is that when you're working on those tanks, those fans are actively working. And then we are also using power air respirators so that they can also assist us because some of the extractor fans do not reach those tanks. So we rather use the powered air respirators. On the this is the one Bosnat is pointing is a formalin sensor in the collection room. And then on the far right picture, we've got Nongoliso working under extractor fan. One of the controls at SIEP, we do air monitoring or health surveillance. This is done annually. We have a 5-year contract with one of the service providers. We've been using them for a while now. This is in line with the compliance of the Hazardous Chemical Substances Regulation Act of 1995 and the Occupational Health and Safety Act of 1993. One of the control measures that we do as SIEP is personal hygiene. To us, it did not start with COVID-19 that we know that we have to wash our hands. I remember way before that, we had signs around all our things that we need to, since we are working with chemicals, we need to have to wash our hands at regular intervals. We were not eating in the collection. No one is allowed to sniff test chemicals because that's not the way to test which chemical it is. Also, no one is allowed to store chemicals in a water bottle because it's color. Most of these chemicals are colorless. Someone might drink them by mistake, so we do not allow that. And definitely no smoking. Another control is various tasks. Since we are working with chemicals, we are trying to minimize the time that we spend so that we are not exposed to chemicals. This is part of the administrative controls. In the collection, since we are working with chemicals, we do have eye wash station and showers. These are for the first few seconds of exposure of substance. These are very critical to have. They provide the spot on the spot chemical contamination. It is advisable that these, according to the material safety data sheet, it is advisable that these are filled with water. And also we are in the process of, since our collection is big, we are in the process of purchasing the portable eye wash station so that we can mount them around the collections and the CMC. PPE is the least effective if you know the hierarchy of control diagram that I showed you in the perfect world. It's the least one, but it's useful as well. So we use gloves, overall safety boots, and other PPE that is necessary, like your goggles, etc. Dealing with chemicals. In the collections, we've got sensors all around the collection. If you look at the left picture, it's a layout of the ground floor. So you can see that the sensors are labeled there, 1, 2, 3, 4 at the corners. So when there's a chemical spill, what is happening is that it triggers the alarm. And also it triggers the fan because we've got the big fan. And then when it triggers that fan, the aircon stops working. So no air gets inside, it's only the air that goes outside. So immediately we hear alarm. There's this diagram here. We can go to it and then see which sensor that triggered the alarm, and then we go and investigate the spill. This is another way of monitoring, which is a building management system. What is happening here? These are also sensors that tells us the that warns us if there's a spill with the formalin, because we've got 2 formalins sensors in the collection. There's one, and also there's also one in the CMC. Even though in the CMC formalin is not allowed, but some of the staff or the scientists might bring it by mistake. Having the sensor there doesn't mean that we allow it to work. We are allowed to work with formalin. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Guy. That was great. So we'll move on to Amanda Gura, also from SAIB, to talk in detail about the medical surveillance. Thanks, Amanda.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Gura from SAIB. I'm a biomaterials laboratory officer. So as Zwei has already mentioned, the risk of the hazardous chemicals that we are working with, so medical tests are very important. So I'm going to talk to you about the medical surveillance. On this picture here is the picture for Health for All, which is our supplier that we do medicals with. They are based in Port Elizabeth, which is known now as Gqeberha. We have a 5-year contract with them. We're on our 3rd year now. So here at SAIB, we do our medicals annually. So our medicals have 2 legs. So the first leg, we do it here in Makhanda. So our first leg of our medicals includes a blood test and also urine test. So for blood tests, they check for our formaldehyde exposure and also isopropanol exposure. So they check how much concentration of the ethanol in our blood. And also they do a full blood count for the staff who are operating the X-ray machine. And they also check in the urine the creatinine level of the creatinine level in our urine to check if our kidneys are still functioning well. On the picture here, we have Spamandla traumatized after he has taken his blood test. Okay, this is our second leg. So our second leg, we do it in Gqeberha. So this is the first part of our second leg, which is whereby on this picture, as you're seeing here, we're filling in our personal details and also answering questions about our medical history. Okay, this is also second leg. So the actual test that we do on our second leg test, we do audiometry, which is the hearing test. So here they just determining our hearing sensitivity at different frequencies, and also have a spirometry, which is the lung functioning test. So that spirometry, they just measure the amount of air we have in our lungs to see if they're still functioning well or not. We have the general observation and examination, whereby they do blood pressure and diabetes tests, and also weigh us and taking our heights to calculate the BMI and all that. But due to COVID, we didn't do the spirometry on our recent medical test. So yeah, so after you've done our tests, we'll wait for our results. So after we've got our results, we also got the fitness medical certificate. So this is just an example of how our certificate look. As you can see, they tell you if you are fit for work or temporal unfit for duty, permanently unfit, etc., etc. Just an example. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Amanda. So yes, that's a very comprehensive test that they do on the staff, but I think it's required by the Health and Safety Act. So thank you for that. All right, so I think we're moving on to our last presentation now from Zinzi. We move on to that one, please, and I'll hand over to you, Zinzi.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Good afternoon, everyone. As as other speakers have said, the collection at SIAP as being guided by the standard SOPs, and signage and procedures that are being followed are detailed down in the SOPs. So the purpose of the SOP is to outline the requirements like for installation and placement and maintenance of the signages in and around the SIAP collection building. It also governs how the workers should comply with the standards of the Institute. It doesn't only apply to us as workers, but also to the contractors. Here at SIAP, we have classified the signage into 4 different categories, with the first category will be the regulatory signs. The regulatory signs are your signs such as smoking, no smoking in this area and no eating on this area. All these signs are at designated places, like when you enter the main entrance, the main building, like the CMC side, and also on the other side of the collection side. As also they show you the kind of PPE that is required for you, and also the road markings, the painted ground surfaces where each says there are no parking in the loading zone, and also how staff and visitors should park their cars on the parking lots that is between the CMC and the collection. And also due to the COVID, now we have these mandatory signs that says the maximum capacity that a CMC can take, it's only 5 people. And as Zwei had said, when working both in the CMC on the other side of the collection, when you're leaving, you need to make it a point that you wash your hands. We have another category, which is a second category, which is hazard signs, which are danger signs. When you go on the chemical stores door, there is a sign that is reflected on your far left screen, and then it says there's a danger, there should be no naked flames and no smoking. And then there is the second one, which is the warning sign, which shows you that there are highly explosive chemicals on the inside. And then on the first floor, on the other side of the collection, there is our X-ray room, which show at the door, there is also a warning sign that shows that do not enter when there is a red light. The red light, when the red light is on, like on top of this X-ray, on top of this sign, there is a red bulb. So when it's on, it becomes red. And then where recyclers are, there is a lift. So in case of fire, you're being warned that you're not allowed to use the lift, and also use the stairs. The stairs will also have will take you through the exit doors, like it shows you the exit signs. It's easy to follow, and even if there is no light, the signs can be easily visible to anyone. We have also the emergency information signs, like our first aid kits, where you find them. I think we have one in the CMC and also one in the collection side. And also we have spill kits both on the CMC or also on the ground in the first floor on the other side of the collection. We have eye washers on the ground floor and also on the first floor, the other side of the collection. And also it shows you the far right picture shows you one of the exits. Like most of the exits at the collection are labeled like that, and you can easily open them they don't need too much strength. We have also the signs on top of each and every fire extinguisher. There are those signs. As I've said, the signs are visible even if there is no light. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Sinzi. So thank you to all our presenters. I think we've learned a lot this morning and this afternoon about working in the collections and the health and safety requirements.